This is the Spurscast with your host, Paul Garcia.
And welcome back to another episode of the Spurscast. On today's episode, I will be speaking with NBA Editorial Director for Fansided, Josh Paredes. In this episode, Josh and I will discuss the Spurs heading into the All-Star break, recent roster moves, and Malaki Branham's play in February. Let's go ahead and jump right into this episode with Josh. Josh, how have you been?
Pretty good, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, let's just go and talk about the Spurs where they're at. I mean, they haven't won a game since I last recorded. I mean, yeah, it's been a tough time if you're a San Antonio Spurs fan, but lottery odds, we're going to talk about how they've kind of improved. All right, so Josh, let's talk about since I last recorded with Joe Garcia about a week ago, you and I are recording on a Thursday evening, so the Spurs are officially on their All-Star break. So this team went 0-4 in their last 4 games since the last recording. So let's go back to last Friday. The Spurs are on the road at Detroit. This is probably their best chance to get a win to end this losing streak, and they couldn't pull it out. So they end up losing by 7 in double overtime against the Pistons. This one, I would say San Antonio really let get away with them because they actually led by 16 very early. The fact that they got a 16-point lead, which doesn't happen often this season, actually only 11 times to be exact. The fact that they had that 16-point lead and they couldn't hold on to it, and then Detroit kept it close throughout. It's just, again, that was their best chance. Best player of the game for San Antonio on that night was Zach Collins. Then the following night, on the second night of a back-to-back, the Spurs traveled to Atlanta, where they play former Spur DeJounte Murray. They lose by 19 here. It was close in the beginning. Then 3 minutes left in the third quarter, Atlanta just blows the game open. Best player for the Spurs is Keldon Johnson on this night. Then on Monday, the Spurs are at Cleveland. They lose by 8 here. The Cavs controlled comfortably throughout by double digits most of the night, but the Spurs got within 4 with 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and then Cleveland, found the answers, and so they ended up winning by 8. Keldon Johnson was, again, the Spurs' best player. And then on Wednesday, the most recent loss came at the hands of the Charlotte Hornets, who are also right there in the lottery odds with San Antonio. The Spurs lose by 10 in Charlotte. Again, another close game. They actually led by double digits. Then Charlotte took over in the final 3 minutes. Best player for San Antonio this night was Malaki Branham, who we're going to talk about a little bit later. So, Josh, the Spurs should have gone 0-4 according to Vegas. They went 0-4. What are your thoughts on these last 4 games?
Well, I mean, I guess the good thing about the All-Star break is they can't lose for the next week or so. that's one. As for the games, it is what it is. I feel like there's a common theme. There's one point in every game where they just unravel. They start turning it over a lot. They can't hit a shot. They can't defend the paint. And that's just what you're going to see from this team, especially after the Pirtle trade and, 2 starters not there, 3 starters not there half the time. The only thing that really bothered me about, as somebody that just wants to keep seeing the growth and the maturity and stuff is the Detroit game. I don't know if you've noticed. I've noticed this has been a trend late in games where they just do not, for whatever reason, their inbounding betrays them in very clutch situations. Yeah. We've seen it probably a lot more this season than any other that I remember. I still remember the Pacers early on where Trey Jones just was like thrown into the fire and they were pressuring him, and the Spurs almost blew that one. I believe they still came out, but this one, it was almost like a, 2013 final situation. Like they were up by like 5 or something with not a lot of time left, 18 seconds or something. And then that turnover. So that kind of stuff, I don't like to see that because it keeps happening. And it just seems like something that should be on the coaching. Like they need to work on that. As far as, the losses I would expect, and then Charlotte, there was some defensive issues there. I did like that Popovich kind of called them out after. I feel like sometimes we get the sense as fans that he's just like having fun this season and he doesn't really care, but it's good to see him like angry with the team and like hold them accountable. Like I know you're young, but we can't just keep saying that. Like you got to show some integrity out there. So 0-4 is fine. Hopefully when they get Devin back, they can continue to be competitive and not repetitive with their turnovers, because that's what's been happening a lot. And they really need this break. Devin Vassell hopefully can, the biggest concern I think for me is just let's make sure his knee is perfectly fine. I don't want another Kawhi situation. And, they need this break to just kind of gather their bearings, let Sohan have fun, and go from there.
Yeah, so I want to make two comments on what you said there. Number one is like you're right about just the lineups they're putting out each night. Because I was just going through their February games to talk about Malaki, and as I was doing that, I was noticing like Trey Jones has only been available for like 2 games of February. Even Jeremy Stohan's only played in 4 games of February, and then of course they made all the trades, so half those players are now gone. Like Jakob Poeltl's gone and Josh Richardson are gone, and they were playing a lot of minutes. And so I think you're right. And then they're adding new players like Devontae Graham's now in addition. Charles Bassey's now getting a lot of minutes. So I think you're right about that. The fact that like just like there's like not a lot of players available, and so there's just a lot on Keldon Johnson's shoulders and Zach Collins and Malaki Branham. And so that's one comment. The second comment is I think that you're right about these. They don't get into close games a lot, but when they do, it definitely shows. They just cannot do anything in the half. They're so predictable. It's just a moment that Keldon's not quite ready for, and I think that's where they really miss Devin Vassell. The fact that he's kind of their closer, their go-to guy, and he was kind of showing some signs there before he got hurt, and so I think that's when it really exacerbates. And like you said, just the turnovers mount there, especially in those closing minutes. I mean, they go from like what I said, like 4-point game, and then all of a sudden they lose. They're like down by 10 within like 2 minutes or a minute. It's wild how
it's crazy how quick it happens. But yeah, Vassell, I still remember. I believe the Chicago game where Devin just hit those back-to-back jumpers to ice the game, and that he has that in him. We know it's just he hasn't been out there because he hasn't been healthy. So that should hopefully help with the rare clutch situations going forward. It's just about how healthy he is and how many minutes they're going to play him to.
And so like, and also what you said about Pop, calling them out finally, like, I think, yeah, he needs to like, and I know that they're 30th in defense, they're a young team, yada, yada, but like, man, like, cause I track a lot of my stats manually from my databases, and sometimes I can't keep up. Like I'll get like a text or a phone call during the game, and all of a sudden it's like a track meet. Like they're just so-and-so scored, so-and-so scored. It's like the teams are just scoring nonstop. It's hard to like get a break. And like, it's just like, wow, like, okay, there goes an alley by that guy and a layup by that guy and a dunk. And so I think, yeah, it was a good sign to see Pop, call them out. Again, they're a young team. Yes, we know that, but like, there's moments like that's like 16-point lead against Charlotte. I mean, not against Charlotte, against Detroit. They should not have lost that. Even that game against Charlotte. I mean, those were kind of two teams on the same level as far as talent right now. So yeah, so I think that was a good sign to see Pop call them out. All right, so Josh, let's talk about where the Spurs are heading into the All-Star break. So they've now played 59 games going into the All-Star break. Season's almost over. 28th on offense still hasn't moved. 30th on defense hasn't moved. 30th in net rating. 14-45 overall, 14th out west. I mean, man, give Houston some credit here. Seriously. The fact that the Spurs are on a 14-game losing streak, that's a franchise record, the worst losing streak in franchise history, and they still can't have a worse record than the Rockets. Man, the Rockets are just terrible to just to not even let San Antonio after a 14-game losing streak pass them up. Wow. They're 0-6 on the road trip, on the rodeo road trip. I think they have 3 games left when they come back on that road trip. Something that did happen since I last recorded is their lottery odds improved. They went from the 3rd worst record to now the 2nd worst record, just behind the Rockets. So that's an improvement. So what that means is still 14% chance at the number 1 overall pick. But if they were to stay their 2nd worst record, that means that they could finish no worse than 6th. So again, last week it was 7th. Now it's 6th. Of course, if they were to get the 2nd pick, they would be expected to take Scoot Henderson. Draft simulations, even having the 2nd worst record is not easy. I mean, last week when they were the 3rd worst, I had to click 10 times to get them with the number 1 pick for Victor Wembanyama. This week, I had to click 11 times, even though they're 2nd in the lottery odds, and it's still to get Victor Wembanyama. So again, even if they have this horrible season, there's no guarantees they're going to get Victor Wembanyama by the end of this. So Josh, what are your thoughts on this team overall going into the All-Star break?
Yeah, just one note on the Rockets aspect of it. We just wrote about recently on Air Alamo. We had somebody write about like which teams are tanking the right way and which ones are still kind of and the Rockets. You see all of the issues they're having. People just not caring. Everybody going one-on-one, and I feel like that's at least something Spurs fans can hold their heads a little bit higher on. Is like there's a lot of bright spots. We're going to talk about Branham in a little bit. So I mean, the record is what it is. I don't think it would be this bad with Devin, obviously, but it's good that it is. In the long run, the Spurs were never going to be chasing any kind of playoff hopes this season. So yeah, I don't like seeing 30th in defense. Obviously, it's very strange to see a Popovich coach team down there all the way down, but it's a new era, and the Spurs really aren't there yet. Everything's about offense nowadays, and Popovich talks about it. So just keep doing what they're doing. I feel like the win here and there will help keep the team not completely discouraged, but I think they're kind of used to it. When you lose 14 in a row, you kind of
Yeah.
accept that, you're trying your best and you don't have the personnel. So just hope that they keep seeing these bright spots here and there, because that's what the season is about. It's just a waiting game until the season's over and we can really start talking about what they can do to utilize all these picks and all this stuff going forward.
Yeah, 100% agree. Especially also what you said there about like the difference between them and the Rockets is like we're seeing that steady progression from Jeremy Sohan develop month after month. We're seeing that that progression from Malaki Branham, who we're about to talk about. So we have seen those adjustments. Even Keldon, he's getting a lot of responsibility. He's starting to grow into that. He's actually been pretty efficient with his attempts here. All right, so now let's go to our second topic here, Josh, and this is Malaki Branham's February. So again, the Spurs have played 8 February games right now, and he's doing a great job. I mean, just the fact that the team I know is terrible. They're 0-8 in this month, 0-14 overall in these on this losing streak. But Branham's been efficient, and considering that he's getting increased responsibility, his shot volume has gone up in a lot of different areas. So let's go ahead and break down his game here, how it's going in February. So in 8 games in February, he's averaging about 33 minutes a night. 18.1 points per game, which is about double what he normally averages, 9 points per game on 14 shot attempts. So he's taking 6 more shots per game. He's taking about almost 2 more threes per game, 5.8 per game. He usually takes 3.7. Getting to the free throw line just barely a little bit more, but it's just shooting. I mean, the fact that he has more responsibility, he's definitely a focal point now for the defenses with a lot of players out, and he's shooting really well. 52% overall from the floor, 41% from 3, 71% from the free throw line. Rebounds have increased, 3.9 rebounds compared to 2.1 normally, 2.9 assists. So he's moving the ball, and then his turnovers really haven't increased at all. It's at 1.3 right now compared to 1. So just 0.3 more turnovers, considering he has the ball in his hands a lot. He's getting a lot more responsibility. I have this model that I created where after every night of a Spurs game, it kind of has like just box score numbers, and it kind of rates who the best players for the Spurs. And so Branham in these 8 February games, he's been the best player on the floor for San Antonio in 3 of those 8 games, and then he's been the third best player also in 3 of those 8 games. So really total, he's been a top 3 player for San Antonio in 6 of their last 8 games of February. And then we also see this in the drives data where he's driving to the basket 4.1 times per game for the season, and right now that's increased to 8.5 times per game. The area where I really see improvement from him when I look at his shooting chart is he's actually, it shows that he's being more aggressive to try to get to the rim. He normally takes about 17% of his shots in the restricted area, which is that area where like dunks and layups come from. And right now that's increased to 23%. And of course, with him shooting just lights out from 3 right now, it's going to make his efficiency even better from on all of his jump shots. And so I've just been really impressed the fact that, again, he's getting more responsibility. Defenses are honing in on him, and he's actually staying efficient. I mean, the biggest example, in my opinion, was just the most recent game against Charlotte. The team shot they shot below 40%, 38% for the entire team. Branham goes 10 of 14 from the floor. I mean, that's just, again, it's pretty remarkable. He's only a rookie, and he's putting up some of these numbers. What have been your thoughts on him in this February stretch?
Yeah, that's an awful lot of data, awful lot of good data to look at. I really like, the 3-level scoring that he's demonstrating. At first he was a little timid. There was a lot of mid-range jumpers, the occasional threes, and now he's just aggressive in all areas. And I think it obviously a lot of it is more opportunity with so many people out. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of
Yes.
Lonnie Walker last year. There was a stretch where he scored about 20 points per game over 3 or 4 times in a row, and it was all opportunity. And then once everybody came back, he kind of just disappeared. So I'm hoping that's not something that happens to Malaki. Obviously, after the All-Star break, we'll see what happens with his minutes with Vassell and others might be coming back. But this is a great sign to see. He's kind of demonstrating what the modern NBA is, with just scoring from everywhere and not really caring that much about defense. If you have a lot of scores, you can have a successful season. It's maybe deep in the playoffs where we'll start to see the defense still matters in the end. That's why I feel like the Celtics are probably favorite in my mind. But Branham is just, a lot of good signs offensively that he's getting to his spots. He's driving. I really like that part too. There wasn't a lot of that early on. And if he's able to do that while he's already, I think he was knocking down 40% of his threes in the last 8, you said, then that's, you can't really predict what he's going to do. And he scores in bunches too. It seems like he'll all of a sudden he'll have 7 to start the game, and then people have to start respecting him, and that opens up the court for others. So not any complaints about what I'm seeing. I'm hoping just that he can keep it going, and that's two rookies now that are really having big growths already. Wesley will be a little bit more of a project probably, but
Yeah.
it's really good to see that this is what we needed to see this season when we all know it's not going to be about the results.
Exactly. You summed that up perfectly. Again, we're seeing that from Malaki and Sohan, and just like again looking at his shooting numbers here, he's getting almost like some of the same shots where like even like his mid range has just been an efficient shot all year. I mean, he usually scores about 0.94 points per mid range shot, and right now it's at 0.95. So again, he's kind of a very steady player. Like you said, 3-level scoring. Teams are still getting him wide open threes, and now that he's making his threes, he's making them pay. So again, I just think that like again, they're a bad team. Yes, right now we see that they're on this losing streak, but the fact that he's staying efficient and like playing really well on a night, almost like a night to night basis. I know he'll have a quiet game here and there, or a struggling game here and there. But again, I just think it's been impressive for Malaki in these 8 games. And you did mention something very interesting. Again, what happens when their lead ball handler Trey Jones comes back to the team? What happens when one of the leading shot takers Devin Vassell comes back to the team? I do want to see how he performs when there's more. There's not as much possessions for him and responsibility in his hands, and I want to see what he does there. All right, so Josh, let's go into our final topic here, and this is some roster moves that the team has made here in the last few days. So let's go back to Tuesday. The Spurs, they actually first they waived Stanley Johnson earlier this week to let him go and sign with a playoff contender. He hasn't signed just yet. And then they converted Charles Bassey's two-way contract. They made it a full NBA deal. So Bassey signed a 4-year deal for $10.2 million with $5.2 million guaranteed. According to Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, this deal is going to be the first 2 years of the deal are guaranteed, and the last 2 years are non-guaranteed. The contract numbers are not out just yet as of Thursday evening, but Spotrac has some estimates, and so they're saying that he's going to earn about $2.7 million this season, and next season $2.6 million. So what does that do for their cap sheet? The Spurs, they still have $22.2 million in cap space this season alone, and then next year they still project to have about $45 million in cap space with Bassey now on this new contract. The Spurs also, since Bassey was taken off the two-way contract, they had an open spot there. And so what they did was on Tuesday, Philly waived Julian Champagnie. I don't know. Bruno Passos tweeted the actual pronunciation. I just saw. He said it's Champagnie. There we go. Julian Champagnie. Okay, that's what it said, the pronunciation guide. Anyway, so Philly waives him on Tuesday, and today on Thursday, you and I recording earlier today, the Spurs claimed him off waivers, and so now he's with San Antonio on a two-way contract. And so the roster is full with both on the NBA side with 15 players, and then now the two-way side with 2 players on two-way contracts. As far as Champagnie, there's not a lot out there because he's a 6'6" forward, and he really didn't play in the NBA this season. He's only played in 2 games with Philly. He's been basically spending all of his time with the Delaware team, and now of course he'll be spending more time with Austin, according to Tom Orsborn of the San Antonio Express News. What are your thoughts, Josh, on the Bassey signing and the Champagnie picking him up off waivers?
Yeah, I mean, I can start with Champagnie because there's not a lot. I don't know how much opportunity he's going to get. Probably going to be an Austin guy. We'll see what he can do. I don't really know much about him other than he could be another guy that the Spurs rehab from Philly that they can regret. With Bassey also, I believe he is. So with getting into Bassey, I feel like this could be one of those deals where it's like it looks like a real bargain going forward. Let's say especially with the 2 years non-guaranteed, like they have a way out. This is good for both sides. I think he can prove himself and really start to see what he can do with. Especially with Pearl gone, we're going to start seeing him more, seeing Dominic Barlow a little bit more too. So I like that signing. I see a lot of potential in Bassey. He does have a lot to learn about the fundamentals and everything. There's just kind of, was it him that had that, like, there was somebody that had a crazy goaltend. That might have been Jang actually, but they all blend together at this point. There's so many just random bigs but Bassey, he has a lot of, he has the body of an NBA player that can be effective. He just needs to kind of be coached and learn how the Spurs work. But I like this. I think it's a good investment. There's not a lot of risk there, so I'm curious to see how he'll do going forward.
He's one of those players where, man, it's like he's just so active on the floor whenever he's out there. Like I'll see him maybe grab like 2 or 3 rebounds, and by the time I look at the box score, he's 11. By the end of the night, I'm like, like he got 11 rebounds or he had 3 blocks. Like he's just really just active all over the place. And you see it too whenever I run their per 36 numbers. He's one of the standout players as far as the bigs, just in a lot of different metrics. So I think he's a really good active player out there. And then also, like you said, just the fact that this team can't even spend their cap space this season alone. So the 2.7 million on the books is not bad. And the next year, 2.6 million when they're gonna have about 45 million to spend again. And again, there's not a lot of free agents out there, marquee free agents. The Spurs are probably gonna still be in rebuilding mode. So again, it's not a bad contract to have if 2 years from now, if he's not working out, they can just waive him on those non-guaranteed deals. So those are the latest roster moves for San Antonio. So thank you to Josh for joining me on this episode of the Spurscast. I also want to say thank you to Joe Garcia for mixing and producing this episode. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.